or comments? Okay, moving on to the Peer Review Oversight Committee. The chair is Jackie Milchi, CPA. Members are Mark Hugh and Brooke Stegmeyer. Page 39 contains the 2021 Quality Assurance Review QAR results report. And Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rajiv. I was actually just going to say it was pretty quiet since our July board meeting, and I don't have anything further to update the board with.
Thank you. Moving on to the ROC. Tom, you're the chair. Page 40 contains a report on the third quarter approval and denials from your committee. And go ahead and rock us, please.
Thanks. The committee that literally and figuratively rocks. Our approved firm names are listed on page 40 of the packet. Everything was pretty uneventful, and I still chuckle when I see immaterial consulting, because I'm interested in learning more about that firm.
Thank you, Tom. The other members I've omitted to mention are Brian Thomas, CPA, and Brooke Stegmeyer, CPA. So that is the report from the ROC. And we now turn to our distinguished colleague, Brian Thomas, CPA, who is going to report for that. The pages 41, 42 contain the SOC committee report and the projected fund balance for the Washington Certified Public Accounting Scholarship Program report. This is one of our most important initiatives in which we nurture the future of the profession. And if I didn't already say so, the members are Brian, Jackie Milchi, and Kate Dixon. And I always look forward to the report of this committee. So Brian, please take over.
Okay, the written report is on page 41. I don't have anything to add to it, but just take a look at the financial performance of that scholarship fund and its performance. I wanted to also mention on page 42 is the forecast for the year ending September 30th of 22. The forecast model assumes a 3% return. Sooner or later, we're going to be thinking that's pretty good, but the last 2 or 3 years has been an outstanding performance. Wanted to mention here also that the master scholarships, which up to this year has been 8,000 a piece, increased to 10. And then our contract between the board and WSCPA, if you look down towards the bottom, calls for a $25,000 administration fee. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. I think the major piece of news here is the decision to increase the master scholarships, which is really keeping an eye on the pressure that students face and is a really major step. So I think the committee is to be applauded for this, for paying attention to this crucial variable. And as you said, 3% returns, yes, we've gotten spoiled a bit, but then we're accountants, we know to take the long-term view, right? So with that, then, unless there are other further comments, move on to the CPA exam remote proctoring task force. But other comments on the SOC report? All right, the CPA exam remote proctoring task force, of which I am a member, and so is Brian. Carol Morgan was with us for part of the year, but then when she rolled off the board, it's just the two of us now. And really, we have nothing to report. You heard before that the initiative has been put on hiatus while they're dealing with other more pressing issues. And unless Brian has something to add, you've already heard the proposal to disband this committee or this task force. And so, Brian, any final words to leave the board with?
No, there's nothing I could say that Colleen didn't.
Great. All right. So that concludes the committee and task force reports. Is there any further conversation to be had on this topic? Okay, moving on, we get to our 12th item. Item number 12 is the enforcement report. And I'm going to invite Taylor, who is our lead investigator, Taylor Sean, who CPA. And I believe we've already recognized Taylor's attainment of the CPA certification. If we hadn't, this is the year, I believe, that he did it. So I just wanted to mention that. And Taylor, I invite you to kindly present the quarterly enforcement and resolved complaints report.
Thank you, Rajiv. This year is actually my first renewal year, so I had to try out the new system. So that was always exciting.
Okay.
Time has been wacky this past couple of years.
I knew there was something new this year, but I forgot what it was. Thank you for correcting me.
I appreciate it. So the enforcement report kind of has the statistics both over the last 3 months and over the last 12 months. It's been pretty quiet in the last quarter, which hopefully tells me that CPAs have been communicating a lot more with clients, because kind of as COVID started and kind of, people worked from home, there's a lot of issues with people not being able to contact their CPA, slow communications, late filings, all of that. That seems to have tapered off. So I think that's part of the reason there. We also updated the complaint form that we have on our online site. And we are now asking the complainants to identify specifically which rules, statutes, or standards they are alleging their CPA violated. So this kind of helps to weed out issues that aren't really within our realm. Also probably helps get a little bit more investment from the complainants from the get-go. It's a little harder to just, at 2 a.m. file an angry complaint against your CPA. And also do a little bit extra research. So it brings them more thoughtful. And we've gotten a few complaints so far that actually outline their specific allegations against the CPAs, which helps them clear their issues, helps us identify the issues, and helps the CPA to respond to them. So it's, I think, working pretty phenomenally on all fronts. Other than that, our caseload has been pretty low and quiet because of that, because of the lower inflow of complaints. And we have a few items teed up for hearing, so we'll see if those go to hearing or if those get resolved before then. Thank you everyone for working with Kirsten on coordinating times for that. But I think that's kind of the lowdown on that. The no CLAR is always an interesting topic, so I get probably 1 to 2 calls a week kind of on that topic that kind of involve no CLAR. So I think the future here will be very helpful. So that's kind of the overview. So if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Hi, Taylor, Brian. Can you characterize your backlog? Are you pleased with the level of it? Has it substantially gone down? I know you said your activity had slowed down, but is the backlog at an acceptable level?
I'd say the backlog is at a fantastic level, actually. We've kind of streamlined our internal processes, both how we handle them within the enforcement team and with Dave interfacing with all the board members here. And so the backlog is primarily cases that are waiting for hearing or some external factors. I think everything's kind of off our plate at the moment, largely waiting on people to respond to complaints or for the outcome of the hearing or due process part of things.
I do have one other thing, and this is actually directed at Mark. Mark, you had decided a year or two ago to allocate out the BAP review process while you were chair, and going through that process was a very educational item for me in the one that I was involved with. So thank you for that decision to delegate.
Thank you, Brian. I mean, I think it's great to get the opinion of board members, and it's a way to keep us all engaged. So thank you.
Having been involved in that process myself, I second Brian's comments on that. I did have a question about this slight change in the filter that Taylor talked about. where the complainant now has the additional requirement of trying to identify some portion of the WAC that is called in play. I'm wondering if you have seen it. It clearly is a very effective way to filter out frivolous or noise complaints where there just isn't enough information for the board to make a determination in one way or the other as to what conceivably could be the basis for the board to take action. I understand that part. But have you seen any difference in the kinds of substantive complaints that you find worth investigating as a result of this change?
Not so much yet. I think the change went into place earlier mid-October. So I think we've only gotten 3-ish complaints since then. Don't quote me on that, but not a lot. So we haven't really seen too much. I think they're all sort of waiting in the CPA to respond spectrum. But I don't know that that's really changed too much. Part of what it helps is, like you said, filter out the noise so we can kind of identify the actual complaint. So they can say, you know, the CPA did not file my taxes. Here's the violated rule, I believe that is, as opposed to a 4-page narrative that eventually culminates in they didn't file my taxes. So I haven't really seen too much in the difference in context yet. I think we'll maybe by the next board meeting, I'll make a note to see if we've got a little bit more and can get a better picture of that.
Thank you. I see David's hand up. So before I say anything more, I'm just going to take his comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The change, I think, is very helpful from a couple of approaches. One is that this involves clients and this involves business folks, licensees. And a board complaint isn't the first step towards resolution. So there's usually a period of trying to work it out. Oftentimes there's family arrangements involved. Oftentimes there's attorneys involved. So by the time it hits board and board staff, it's moved beyond fact to emotion plus fact, right? And so oftentimes we heard Taylor refer to a 4-page narrative that really gets down into what the meat of it is. And that is true because the complaints that I have seen since I've been with the board are very lengthy and it's emotion driven. And these folks have very legitimate feelings for the way that they feel. There's reasons for the way that they feel, so we don't want to take anything away from that. But it is oftentimes very difficult to weed through all of that to really find where board jurisdiction lies. So this will help towards that. We should see results, as Taylor said, maybe by next board meeting. And I think we can report on that, but it really is, I think, from my perspective, a good change to the form. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I very much appreciate that because we want to be efficient. We don't want to be wasting a lot of state resources weeding through complaints that are too nebulous to be acted upon. And I really appreciate your sensitivity to that, and both Taylor and you offering to track a little bit longer to see what happens to the complaints that we do receive is an excellent idea, because the researcher in me can't help always ask, if we change one variable, is there an indirect influence that might affect the spectrum of legitimate complaints that come in? No harm in monitoring that for a year or two, just to make sure that we have not inadvertently sort of affected the distribution of legitimate complaints that come in, right? And there's a lot of research that shows smallest changes can trigger all kinds of effects. So I'm really glad that both you and Taylor are open to doing that little bit of extra work that ensures and provides our both the regulatees and the public the confidence that, yes, even this seemingly small change, seemingly reasonable change, is being monitored for its unanticipated consequences. I think it's a very important part of retaining our public's trust. And again, I'll just conclude by saying, I very much appreciate your and Taylor's sensitivity to that.
And real quick, if I might, Rashid, one thing I should add is if we get a complaint and they don't identify any statutes, we'll still receive and look into that complaint. So it's kind of a very strongly encouraged point, but not strictly required.
Wonderful, thank you. That adds an additional level of clarification that I believe is very useful. Thank you, Taylor. Okay, any other comments? So thank you. Once again, as I hope people realize, we keep an eye on how efficient we are, while at the same time making sure that we do discharge our obligations that we're tasked with under the Act, and we are mindful of the burdens we impose on both the regulated population as well as the benefits to the general population of the state, which is our mission. All right, so with that then, I move on to item number 13, which is executive and or closed sessions with legal counsel. I have not been advised that we have such a session. Do we have one today?
No, we do not, Roger.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so then we get to the fun part of the meeting, which I always look to, which is time for the public input. So we have Dr. Smith, who I recall seeing his comment. Are there any other individuals who have? Kirsten or Jen, have you seen anybody else?
No, I have not.
I have not.
Great. So if there are any other members of the public who feel motivated to have an input, please type your name into chat. You'll have 10 minutes. But given that he was the first to sign up, I now recognize Dr. Ken Smith to kindly provide us with his comments.
Dr. Smith has asked staff if it would be possible to open the document that he put in the chat so he can share it. Kirsten,
absolutely. If the staff are comfortable doing it, I'm all for it.
Kirsten, is that something that you can do?
I would ask that somebody else do it. I take notes so I don't run the meeting itself. I don't share my screen.
Ken, why don't you go ahead and we'll get this open for
Okay,
you.
thank you so much for being recognized, Chair Dugar, and for the board and for the public. So I had prepared a brief written document. The brief document for today is 2 pages. It has attached, thank you so much. It has attached also the 6 pages that I had sent to the Attorney General. I think I want to frame this because I think there's a lot of confusion about what is the issue. The issue is whether the 2,000 audits of local government in Washington conducted by CPAs, if finally issued, would be subject to review, the licensed auditor oversight or not. The policy that is being adopted earlier in agenda item 8 essentially says there is no licensed auditor oversight for these 2,000 audits. And I think that's a problem. And I thought that's a problem since this issue arose about 2.5 years ago. Okay. So if we can scroll down just a little bit, thank you, and then keep the red line. So the recommendation that I'm making, and I think it should be discussed in the public with other constituents, is something changed in RCW 1804.350 subsection 12. And there's a section in there that says nothing in this chapter prohibits any word, any act, or any words of a public official or public employee. And that is an absolute blanket immunity to public officials in the duties. Now, that's not the way most states have interpreted it. The way the Uniform Accountancy Act says their duties, comma, as such, okay? So, as I go through here further, I've been a public official and a public employee in a couple different ways. When I was an elected school board official, those of you on this board are appointed government officials, and you have duties that you have with the ethics laws and open public meetings, et cetera. As an elected official, I had those as well. Had I been an active CPA, the CPA Act should not apply to my duties as such as a school board member, because I'm not doing anything related to accounting. When I was a professor at the University of Washington, teaching public administration students, I was teaching about budgeting and finance, but not about preparing financial reports or auditing, then I'm not doing duties as such that are the practice of public accounting. I don't think the chapter would comply. When I was an administrator at Central Washington University, they wouldn't apply. When I was a professor at Central Washington University, teaching accountants, preparing them, teaching the auditing class, et cetera, I think there would be some level of, I shouldn't be teaching them the wrong way to do the professional licensed duties of an auditor. And if I were doing that, perhaps it would apply, but that's not exactly the practice of public accounting. And then when I served as a public accountant doing audits of governments, nonprofits, and business, absolutely it should apply. So the point here is that there's probably about 99% of government employees whose duties have nothing to do with accounting or the Accountancy Act. And every employee who has non-Accountancy Act duties should not be held accountable to this. That's not what we're talking about. And so in some sense, the exception is including 100%. It should only include 99%. If you are a government employee or government official engaged in the practice of public accounting, I believe you should be subject to that. Now, if you continue down the path, if the board continues down the path they do, I think you should recommend that the legislation be changed. And I made this advice 18 months ago at the April meeting in 2020. If you're not going to oversee local government, then say that we are the nonprofit and for-profit accountancy board, and local government auditing is done through some separate mechanism. If you're unwilling to do that, be very clear to the public that there's this unlicensed group of CPAs and non-CPAs issuing audit reports, and that the public has no recourse through the State Board of Accountancy, and in the current law, no recourse at all if there's a dispute about their practice of public accounting. If you could scroll down, please. So there's the rest of the background. I submitted the thing. There's the 2 words, attest and practice of public accounting. If you can hold there, please. Thank you so much. The lawyer's opinion to you is really problematic. And I think one of the reasons why they said probably not is they know that a good lawyer going against statutory interpretation would make a very compelling case that you would have a hard time to respond to. So they leave it out of your AGO opinion. Now, you could follow up with them, and you could do it in public. There's no reason why you have to go in a meeting, because you're supposed to protect the public. It says, so tell us about a test and practice of public accounting. You'll notice that the AGO opinion omits those. They're in my comment because that's the core question. There's a long list of duties, and then they do plain reading, statutory interpretation. For those who are familiar with that, I'm not a lawyer, but I've studied this for a couple different projects. I think the legal standing that you have is much weaker, and it's why the Attorney General said probably not. If you could please go down. So then the personal examples, I already gave this about the public official, public employee, and those duties. And if you can scroll down a little bit further, there really are, yeah, get those 3 things. There's really 3 groups of people that we should be caring about. Those whose government duties are no accounting, those who are some accounting, like if you're a controller, payroll clerk, if you're preparing the annual financial report. Now, our CPA laws usually generally says that's not the practice of public accounting, but as a CPA, you have a certain level of legal obligations for that, whether you're preparing, compiling, preparing the annual report, not auditing it, but preparing for a nonprofit, a government, or a for-profit. So I believe that the way that the statute is intended to, I think it's plain reading, it's clear to me. I'm not sure why it's not clear to someone else. It was never intended to be 100%. It was a 99% exclusion. The only ones that should be, the ones that should be excluded are the 99% of that are no accounting and some accounting. Those that are public accounting should never have been excluded from this. And I just think that's a mistake. And I think there's been a lot of rationalizations to try and make this fit. A colleague, I presented this concerns at an academic conference. I presented it with other professional groups. And so I want to get to the last point of that, the concern about the advocacy on this. But no one who I've shared this with thinks that what you're doing is a good idea. When you say, so wait a second, CPAs aren't being held accountable to CPA, that doesn't make sense. So when I was sharing it, one of my colleagues who studies ethics, a former Washington State University professor, said, well, you're familiar with this book by Mary Gentile. Looks like Gentile, but it's Gentile, about speaking voice to values. And it talks about how we know what's right, and then we get caught up in all these languages about rationalizations. Those of us who've studied fraud or teach fraud, which I do. And so I would encourage the board to get a summary of Mary Gentile speaking voice to values, and find your voice to say, actually, what we've done here is wrong. Those who do the audits of local governments should be subject to our thing, or we should set something else up. But we're doing a disservice to the public by not having a process for that. And then my last comment is, I'm disappointed. I truly am. I thought that this body wouldn't kind of make the first choice wrong or get bad advice. I think you're getting a tremendous amount of political pressure, probably from the state auditor's office and perhaps even from the governor's office. And I think that's also disappointing. But you're a public body, and you're subject to lobbying and interactions. I've been waiting for this AGO, was hoping you'd make a better choice today for the public. You did not. As a board, you did not. And that's you can call an emergency meeting and try to correct it. And so there's legislators who care about this. There's professional accountants, there's citizens. And so the lobbying process works, and you're a public official, okay, appointed, but you're still a public official. People find out and they say, who is this person? What choice did they make? And that sounds like a threat. I hate that it's like that, but we've tried to work together. And then to Mr. Hughes' comments earlier, I tried to keep track of them. I just have to respectfully disagree with some of them. The privilege and communication and getting that in the public, I completely agree with it. That's excellent that we now have it out in the public. That letter obviously agrees with you. I don't think so. I think you should get another opinion, and you should talk to some other lawyers, talk to some good government groups, and say, hey, wait a second, it doesn't include these two things, attest and public accounting. The governor's office not getting this, the AGO opinion not getting out until just the month after the governor's office could include it. I've shared that with a couple people and some politically savvy people. They say that doesn't kind of add up. It looks like the governor's office isn't helping here, and that's really disappointing. The headers on the state auditor.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. The headers on the state auditor's office, that's probably due to what I brought in, because the auditors in the state auditor's office are the only ones I know for which this would apply to. So I think that's why that came in the AG opinion. The comment that this is a once in a decade issue, I'm going to push back on that I think a lot of people don't report through concerns. I'm on the ground, have worked with, especially when I was at University of Washington in the public affairs school. We had a group of public financial management folks. There's concerns about the state auditor more than a few, and a lot of people don't know when, where, and how. And there was also a reputation when I started this that the State Board of Accountancy protects the state auditor rather than serving the public. And that's disappointing. And the actions thus far are consistent with that fear of either retaliation or a lack of support. So there may be reasons why not that much has come up, but that doesn't mean that you don't deal with it. It's an issue that's been brought. And then lastly, the Uniform Accountancy Act, absolutely. There's language there, but there's no other state that I've talked to. And one of my colleagues is a former chair of a state board of accountancy. There's no other board that she's aware of or that I'm aware of that has done this. I think the key is, as such, this exception is for the 99%, not 100%, and that you should either be honest that you don't want to touch the state auditor's office for whatever reason, and there needs to be some coverage of that, or you should cover it. I think you have the capacity and the proper body to do that, but if for other political reasons that's not possible, then let's create some mechanism that provides the oversight. But right now, 2,000 audits, there's no oversight. that doesn't protect the public. I really do thank you for your time. And I've never talked with any one of you as the board offline. None of you have reached out to me. There was a waiting for this thing. I'm happy to do that if you think it's appropriate. And I don't think you've ever met with any of the community members on this issue. And I would hope that you create some outreach for that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Do the board members have any questions for Dr. Smith? Because when somebody provides input, I think this is a good time for us to engage in question and answers with him. So I'm going to invite members of the board to pose any questions they might have for him that would be helpful to us as we move forward with his input.
Rajiv, this is Tom. I was just going to ask Jen if she could make sure that we got a copy of sent to my board email or something of the information that Dr. Smith has provided. Thanks.
Absolutely. We will make sure that that is distributed to all board members. I certainly have it. Dr. Smith posted the link. I immediately went and downloaded it myself. So it's there in the comments, but nonetheless, we will go through the formal process of admitting that and then incorporating that into our deliberations. Yes, I heard another voice there.
Yeah, this is Dave again. Since Dr. Smith provided this as a part of public record, it will be incorporated into our public record documents. So it is now an official matter of record for this meeting.
Excellent. That's wonderful. And I just want to add in my capacity as the chair of the board that Dr. Smith is of course fully entitled 125% in my view to take the position he has taken, and I have taken similar positions. I just want to note for the record that some of the comments that he made suggesting what might be motivating the board are just his conjectures and his personal opinions. I just wanted to flag that. And I, for myself, have outstated openly a very different reading of the reality of the way the board functions and has functioned. And so everything that has been said about lobbying and about there being non-public inputs and things like that, I wish to state for the record that everything that the board receives, all the information we receive, we are very careful not to even communicate with each other. We direct our communications directly through the board staff. So any chance that the board has, at least in my 6 years of functioning on the board, of the board being somehow kind of being susceptible to kinds of lobbying or internal kind of processes that are not public, I just want to state for the record that our board follows a scrupulous process by which all of the information that board members bring to the deliberations are all public, as they, in my opinion, should be. So with that, I guess the public input section is over. Are there, excuse me, are there any other individuals who wish to be heard? If not, then there being no other business, I move that the meeting be concluded. Any further comments from any board members or from the executive director or the staff?
I have a closing comment, which would be to just thank everybody for their attendance today. Dr. Smith, thank you for documents, and just want to welcome all incoming board officers for 2022. Thanks, everybody. That was my closing comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. And with that, I bid everyone a happy rest of the year, holiday season, and we shall be back again in our public meeting in January. And with that, this board meeting is ended. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajiv. Rajiv, I just want to say that even though our microphones are off, I assure you I'm chuckling at your jokes throughout the